Hello and welcome. I'm Helen Atkinson, Senior Editor at Supply Chain Brain. I'm delighted to be moderating this webinar today, sponsored by Tive, the topic for which is aligning end-to-end supply chain to meet today's pharma customer expectations. I think COVID showed us all that there was and is an urgent need to create a communications ecosystem so everyone in the chain can communicate quickly and clearly on the location and condition of shipments. Beyond the pandemic, we've seen the Amazon effect heighten customer expectations, coupled with more tech-savvy and informed customers. A lot of challenges there, particularly for the pharma supply chain, and we're going to hear all about that today. After I introduce our speakers, we'll have a panel session, followed by a Q&A session with questions from the audience. So please submit questions at any time using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using people's titles or company names, so you can go ahead and ask whatever you like. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured Tive team will reach out to you offline. Right, let's get to our speakers. Robert Bain is Principal Consultant at Professional Supply Chain Resources. Robert has worked in big pharma and also at FedEx. He'll be offering a big picture view. He has over 30 years of experience in global supply chain management and is an established thought leader in the industry with expertise in cold chain logistics and compliance. As principal consultant and owner of Professional Supply Chain Resources, Bain provides value-added services in the areas of global supply chain, logistics, cold chain, trade compliance, and supply chain tech strategy for numerous clients in the pharmaceutical, biotech, and cell therapy industries. Next up is Alex Gillen. He's Director of Sales, Life Sciences, and Pharma at Tive. Alex is an established executive with a proven record in global business and market development, with well-rounded experience in multicultural sales, management, and brand building. And Alex is joining us today from Logipharma, so we've got a live, exciting element there. And then finally, we have Martin Forrest. He's our tech guy. He's VP of Technology at Tive, and he brings over 20 years of product development from concept to high volume manufacturing of wireless, consumer, and medical products. He has developed a wide range of reliable products, including the first iPhone-connected glucose meter, the Sanofi IBG Star, sold in 35 countries, and several diagnostic products sold in pharmacies today. So each of our speakers is going to give a brief summary of the subject matter, and then we'll get into the panel session. I believe Robert is going to start us off, so I'm going to hand it over to you, Robert.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. I appreciate everybody's time today. I'll start it off by really talking about cold chain in the pharma world and how technology has advanced. I see in my experience a lot of advancements in packaging, the passive and the active containers, more phase change material, vacuum insulated panels, compressor base versus dry ice, and then liquid nitrogen, shipments, again, advancing throughout the pharmaceutical world. Where I think there's some opportunities is really as it relates to monitoring, becoming more proactive in the visibility of the monitors and how your shipments are doing in transit. Alex, you're at Logipharm, I believe. What are you hearing?
Thank you, Bobby. Yes, I greet everybody from Nice and Logipharma. And before anything, I must say that we are here in a packed conference. I never expected to see so many people, whether from the industry and whether as service suppliers. So IoT monitoring is definitely very well spoken today. But the same way, you have a lot of movements and a lot of trends in terms of sustainable products, sustainable materials, whatever kind of systems that are able to help shipments in a sustainable way. Also, one of the things that we're seeing here, I didn't see enough, was a lot of supply chain platforms, end-to-end, a lot of presentations on end-to-end and visibility in sustainability, but sustainable visibility, we can say like that. And in terms of packaging, well, there never been so many companies that are coming up with new ideas in terms of reusing the packaging, reusing, recycling them in order to be more ecologically friendly. So pack placing Logi Pharma after 2 years of lockdown, everybody wants to talk to each other, share, and that sense of cooperation that we have seen in the last years, in the last 2 years in the pharma industry, we are seeing it today here in Nice, in France, with Logi Pharma. And but I want just to hear the technology, Martin. Any news? You're there in Boston, Center of the World for Technology. Can you just share something with us?
Oh, sure, sure. Great to see that everything is going well in Logi Pharma. From the technology side, there's so much going on. I would say that the last few years have been pretty amazing with the event of the 5G networks globally. Also, the low power IoT networks, IoT meaning Internet of Things. This terminology did not even exist a few years ago. So this idea of connecting sensors, reporting in real time, is actually changing the world of logistics and allowing for collaboration in real time. So to be able to save, for example, a shipment that maybe was left on the tarmac or being changed, in real time. So it's quite exciting, and I think that that with everything that is happening right now, with the challenge of moving goods around the world, it's just having a way to monitor is really key.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much to Robert, Alex, and Martin. That was a great introduction to this subject. Now we're going to get into a panel discussion so we can dig into it a little deeper and really find out how a real-time communication ecosystem gets created and what sort of benefits it can offer. So I think my first question is to you, Martin. How have you seen the implementation of technology evolve to date? And where do you think we will be going in the pharma supply chain space in that regard?
Yeah, so as I mentioned briefly, we're coming into a new generations of network around the world, cellular networks that can be leveraged by devices to communicate data. And these kinds of networks also come with location improvements. So for example, device can now figure out where they are, not only with GPS satellite signals, but also with cellular signals, with Wi-Fi signals. So all of this information can be communicated back for getting not only the condition of the shipment, but also the accurate location of shipments. And that's really an evolution that I've seen over the last few years change. In addition to this, I would say that the reliability of the data became better. So a few years ago, you would be able to communicate in some countries, but the communications were maybe not good in some other countries. So that became much more reliable. And finally, I would say the cloud type of software technology allows the data to be visually available via some secure websites. So it allows for collaborations between teams to be able to act on this kind of real-time data. So so that's really, I think, the different changes that I've seen over the last few years.
That's very interesting. So what you've seen is, I mean, I think everybody in the supply chain in every industry has seen a massive flood of available data coming into the systems. And what you're saying is that particularly because of the expansion of the types of data and the real-time nature of it, there's an opportunity for companies to collaborate in a way that they haven't before. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I think having a lot of data is one thing. Being able to take action on insight is another thing. And I think that's really the key here, is not to bombard the logistic teams with data, but give them the tools that they can really quickly at a glance take an action, or rely on the monitoring team to take actions for their shipments. So that's really what these systems allow today.
Right, so it's a whole new world. That's fantastic. So let's go back into the real world, which is messy. What sort of impact did the COVID-19 pandemic have on supply chain management in pharma? I'm going to hand that to Robert. What did you see in the big picture? Yeah.
Well, COVID was a huge impact to all supply chains. No one can avoid that. You put your TV on to any news station and you hear it every night. But one of the things that, from people are asked why or how, disruptions are key to this. You had disruptions in sourcing goods, you had labor shortages, you had impacts to transparency, you had remote learning, so people weren't in the office, airline shrinking their flights, trucks shrinking. So where, and I look at it from a pharma perspective, we work one disruption at a time when we manage excursions. This was a variety of disruptions that compounded each other and made it very difficult. There was quite a few companies I was working on. They had a daily briefing on COVID. They had a command center of different global locations and what was happening in each location and how things were, how the flow of goods were coming into different countries. But what I also saw was on the positive side, the organization of Warp Speed. I've talked to many people that were involved with Warp Speed, and the sheer volume once the vaccines were approved, and the methodology of the Pfizers and the Modernas and AstraZeneca of having their products available, and then just pushing it out to not only the U.S. but globally, in Warp Speed, right, to help. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, and really how I started even looking into real-time monitoring, was most of those shipments had some form of real-time monitoring, so they could see the reliability of the tool that Martin mentioned. Was a big impact into this because it made it more reliable, and they were able to move this product very quickly, despite all the disruptions that COVID provided.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I think, we saw supply chain disruptions everywhere, of course, but I think the pharmaceutical supply chain was so much more essential and in many ways more vulnerable particularly because of vaccines and the distribution. So yeah, that's great. Thank you, Robert. Alex, I'm curious to know, what are the major trends you see in monitoring versus controlling pharma supply chains?
Yeah, so just for the public in general, when we talk about monitoring, we're basically understanding whether it's after the fact or whether it's in real time, what's going on with the shipment. When we talk about controlling, is everything about how do you protect that shipment. So it's the type of packaging that you use, it's this type of pallet shipper that you're using, the type of container you use to protect the integrity of the product, right? So those two things were, let's say, technology is helping us to connect those two. Traditionally, monitoring was companies manufacturing monitoring instruments, and controlling was company manufacturing packaging. What has happened right now with the evolution of technology is that those two, let's say, protection and monitoring are getting together. Why? Is because on one side, shipments that mean controlling packaging, temperature control packaging, on the one side, there's a big trend to have reusable shipments. So every time that instead of just being single use and having a lot of this not sustainable way of controlling, materials now are being much more robust when you manufacture a reusable shipper or reusable temperature control packaging. And this reusing of a temperature control packaging allows also the implementation of better technology. So instead of just having a temperature monitor, a data logger inside the packaging, now you could start thinking, well, maybe I can actually put a little device there that allows me not only, capturing temperature, maybe more information, right? And this monitoring in the controlling on the packaging was made now in a way that you don't only understand what is going on inside your shipment, you also understand, wow, what is the performance of the packaging, because you can measure the inside temperature and the ambient temperature, correlate those two, and see if that package is performing as it has been validated. On the other hand, adding this, we were talking earlier about sensors, putting different kind of sensings in it makes it that much more smart in terms of packaging. And now the last point is, and I'm sorry, but I was in a conference and my voice is kind of going away. So the last point of it is like the same monitoring devices that are real time and intelligent allows the company, the packaging company, actually to reuse them, because now you have a real time monitor inside the packaging, and that helps the receiver, I mean the shipper, understand where that packaging, the valuable, well robust, made for multi-use packaging is at the clinical site, at the hospital, in a warehouse, and then you can retrieve it back, right? So that connection, that compatibility between the packaging and the monitor and the smarter monitoring makes it much more easier for pharmaceutical companies to manage their shipments, to manage the integrity of the product, and also to manage the return logistics, which is now very, very important in order to have sustainable ways to manage cold chain.
Wow, that's really interesting. I hadn't thought about that as being a sort of side benefit of going over to reusable, more sustainable packaging, that you can put the sensors in there and they can be used over and over again. So you get all this extra information. That's fantastic. So Robert, I wanted to ask you, what do you see as the major challenges in general supply chain management in the future? Let's widen it out from pharma for a bit.
Yeah, so well, you're talking specific to pharma about you know, really the advancement in medicine has also provided complexities within logistics challenges. You know, you have biologics that are predominantly refrigerated shipments with short shelf life in some cases. So every minute that this product is available, you know, you need to move it and transport it. And barring any type of delay or disruption that could affect the efficacy of the product, that's always a challenge. But then cell and gene therapy, now you're actually you know, I've worked with a product where you extracted white blood cells out of a patient and sent those off to a lab, and then the lab had to re-engineer the product, which goes right back into the patient to help solve medical illness. And you know, that's a challenge, a closed loop logistics process that not only involves a quick turnaround. A lot of these patients have, you know, this is their last effort in survival, and it's 3 to 4 months to live. And, you know, they can't wait on, you know, they can't wait on FedEx to miss a flight or leave something on a tarmac. You know, this is, you know, life threatening issues that could happen. So, you know, that to me steps up the practice around management. You can't be reactive anymore to these different occurrences that happen when it's outside the pharmaceuticals four walls, and you have to really look at it at a different perspective now. You know, 24/7 monitoring, the ability to see in transit if a product is going to an airport that's going to be canceled, you know, or on a flight that's going to be canceled, and being able to re-divert it. And I've even seen instances where you've seen product that is in the U.S. going from one manufacturing to a distribution center, and you see it go off route, and you can call the you know, trucking company dispatch and say, hey, my product isn't going on the route that it's supposed to be going on, and they revere it back up. You can't do that, you know, in the widely popular old data logger environment that we have now. So, you know, these are just a few things that I see as opportunities, especially as we build out this technology. Martin said it really good. The thing is now is, you know, real time has been around, but the reliability within the last couple of years has been really a good reason that people need to start looking at this product.
Wow, that's fantastic. So there's really been a change, improvement. It sounds like. Well, so let's dig a little bit into some more technical stuff. So Martin, what are the key supply chain challenges in cell therapy and ultra cold shipments, like the really specialized stuff?
Yeah, so typically ultra cold shipment are moved with what's called a cryo shipper. So Bobby mentioned it a little bit earlier. Those kind of canister that are filled with liquid nitrogen and have a place for putting the cells in it. These canister are very, I would say, solid and you know, they can protect the specimen very well. But for monitoring this, there is some challenges. You need to be able to fit a probe inside because the electronics of data loggers and trackers they cannot sustain this kind of temperature range. Typically, it's you know, around -200 Celsius. So actually at TIVE, we are just releasing a probe that will support these kinds of shipment. And so essentially the device is mounted on top of the cryo shipper, and then the probe is filled inside to access the ultra cold temperature. So in real time, you can actually monitor not only the ambient around the cryo shipper, but also the actual ultra cold temperature.
That's amazing that you can do that at -200 degrees. That's pretty cold. So Alex, I want to come back to you. Can you define the major challenges of commercial pharma compared to clinical logistics? Those are two different supply chains, I guess.
Yes. So it is all about time. And for me, I was working with Novartis vaccines for some time, and everything can happen there in about 3 weeks, 2 weeks, maybe 1 month, because you can have also C shipments. And then I worked for Fisher Clinical Services for 5 years as a global cold chain, overlooking the global cold chain across the organization. And then all of a sudden, everything goes to 1 day, 2 days, maximum 3 days, right? So the challenges are totally different because you have everything in clinical trials happening in such a short time. And while all of a sudden in commercial, you're going to have other challenges, which is you might have sea freight and you might have longer terms that could also put the shipment at risk because, you know, you have a long time, you know, not every packaging is capable of holding such a long time. So we have to have active system or active containers, basically, where they need to be recharged. So there is a whole supply chain issue that is happening. The other thing in commercial shipment is that it's about systems are already established. It's very difficult it's impossible to change them. And one good example I see here at Logi Pharma right now, I had some very interesting discussions with some of our customers is, look what is happening in commercial shipments right now with the situation that is happening in Russia and Ukraine. So all of a sudden you have the lanes being validated from Europe into Asia. That lane was, you know, that airplane was usually flying, you know, on top of Russia. And that, if you want to change that validation, you want to have a shipment going now with a different route, it normally takes 6 months to make the revalidation. So how do we do now? Now all of a sudden there is a war, there is a conflict, the space of Russia is totally blocked. So now you have to revalidate. Revalidation becomes a huge challenge, and that's where real-time monitoring all of a sudden makes a big sense, because now I can actually know as a fact where my shipment is going, and it's going to help me to validate that route, that new route, in a much shorter period of time. So it's not just the long haul areas, but it's also what kind of disruptions can happen, not necessarily a war, but a pandemic, a situation, a World Cup, anything can happen that you have disruptions and you need to change those lanes. And therefore you need to have the right tools to do it. On the clinical side, on the other hand, everything is happening between 2 and 3 days. Everything is happening very fast, right? And here there is a critical point on clinical science as the patient is waiting, right? So in phase 1, you are doing trials trying to check into the collateral effects of the new drug. But from phase 2 and phase 3, you're actually patient waiting. And when you have these rare diseases, you might be the last, just as Robert was saying, you might be the last opportunity for some patients. So the drug must arrive on time. It must arrive in full. It must be 100%, you know, with full integrity, because somebody's life is at the stake, because somebody is really waiting, because somebody will not have even the time for the second time to do this. And the complications when you do a clinical trial when you have to you have to get the patients in the hospital, have them there for about 2-3 hours, and all of a sudden the clinical supplies are not there. It's not just the fact of, it's really putting at risk the whole study about it, because you cannot just make them wait for you 2 days, 3 days. So real-time monitoring, right packaging, right logistics, specialized 3PLs, they play a huge role and make a big difference in these short-term shipments. So that is key. So there's two different worlds, and many times that's the reason why a logistics management in a big pharma or biologistics company, they are actually two different groups managing, because it's two different worlds. But technology right now is really making things possible that 3 years ago was impossible. In the times when I was in Fisher, I would have loved to see what we have now.
Wow, that's amazing that things have changed so much, and fortunate that they did so in time. That's wonderful. Robert, perhaps you could bring a close to the panel session with saying what we're interested in is, what can leaders in pharma supply chain learn from other industries?
That's a good question, Helen. There's a lot when supply chain, and the way supply chains have evolved in many different industries, that everybody's looking over at the other industry to see what people are doing. I think if I was to really step back and look at the opportunities that pharma has, is over the last 7 to 10 years, pharma has developed this model, and not all, but a lot of them have said, we're going to focus on our key specialization, and that's usually discovery, research and development. Everything else, we'll let the experts do it. So when that happens, you have now CMOs, contract manufacturing organizations that are making the pharma's freight. You've got CROs, contract research organizations that are aiding in the outsourced activities around products. You've got 3PLs, global 3PLs that move the products around, and then you obviously have the transport providers, which is good in essence. But one of the things that I really see is that you lose some control and you lose visibility in the products. Take for instance CMOs. I see that you're fighting. One pharma company is fighting for the schedule of another pharma and another pharma and another pharma company to get on the line to produce the products. The quality is not. You don't have your quality staff at these outsourced locations, so that provides an area of complexity and a length and time of reaction. So and then you have I think this is a year-old discussion around pharma. Is they're not because of what of their own demise, but you have wholesalers that are basically the middlemen between them and their customers. You lose the visibility, you lose what your customers want, or if the complaints happen, sometime after the wholesaler got it to the customer, you don't hear about it unless it's secondhand. So, I think that those are the key pieces of supply chain, and a lot of people, a lot of companies or a lot of people within the pharma world try to figure out, what the right approach is. And I'm not saying that a lot of the outsourcing is bad, but but it comes with different issues as well.
Sure, it comes at a cost. Actually, it sounds from listening to you like it's other industries who could learn a lot from pharma supply chain, having got everything so the elements of control being so important. And I think a lot of companies learned that during the pandemic. Thank you so much, Robert. And now we're going to get to some questions from the audience. Once again, please submit your questions using the tab at the bottom of your screen. We will not be using people's titles or company names, so you should go ahead and ask whatever you like. If you don't see your question answered during the webinar, please be assured the Tive team will reach out to you offline. I've got a quick technical question, actually. Martin, you were talking about the probes for cryo shipping temperatures. We have someone here who wants to know, are those Bluetooth capable, and what is the name of this product?
Oh yes. So in the case of Tive, the device has a port that can be used to expand the sensors of the device. So if you connect the probe on this port, then the probe will provide data to the tracker, and the tracker will send this to the Tive SaaS software on the cloud. So and the name of the probe is called the Tive Cryogenic Probe, and this will be announced. It's kind of a preview here, but it will be announced. I think maybe it was already announced, Alex, at Logitech or Logi Pharma, or no?
Yes. So actually, I have it right here.
Wow,
So
look at that.
So exactly, a cryogenic probe. You're right. So it is. It is being
Fantastic.
announced. We have it. We had it made it public. The dry ice and the cryogenic.
Great, fantastic. Brand new, right out of the box. Excellent. So I've got some interesting questions here. Martin, this one's for you. In terms of technology, what do you think will be the major drivers in the future? What are we going to see coming down the pike?
Yeah, that's a big one. From my perspective, I definitely look at the different networks that are available around the world that are being created. I talked about the 5G network, but there's also kind of a low power network that is being made around the world. Sometimes even in the US, for example, we have this network called the People's Network, which is interesting in terms of being able to leverage low power, low cost network to send data reliably. So this is something I'm really in touch and monitor and figure out how we can use and leverage these types of new connectivity technology. On the other side, I also think that from a usability point of view, the trackers are really easy to use, but I do see, for example, a form factor which looks more like a label, which would be very interesting for the industry. The idea of having a kind of a smart label, which has similar functionality as the tracker that we have today, but in a format where it can just be applied, maybe even printed on. So this kind of technology, I think, will make its way in the future and will also play a role in the monitoring side.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating. Thank you. And Alex, speaking of technological developments and new sensors, besides temperature, what else do you think pharma companies should be looking at?
So I was saying earlier, right? Now there is possibilities to maybe sometimes products can be over-engineered, but generally what I see is, was mentioned earlier, there is more biologics. There is a pharmaceuticals chemistry. Biologics means alive. Like vaccines, antibiotics, oncology, and these are very, very special, very expensive, special products, and which integrity are very difficult to maintain, which temperature sometimes is a challenge. And here I will say that besides temperature, not only temperature, we used to have just 2 to 8, 0. Now we have the dry ice and of course ultra cold temperatures. But when we think about ultra cold temperatures, there is a phenomenon that you need to understand, the tilting of the cryogenic. And that means sensing that allows you to measure that tilting or that moving will also help to actually get accuracy for a cryogenic. Light is becoming more and more important. There are some biologics that can be, let's say, big shifters of up and down of light are definitely just not good. Humidity was measured only. The reason why humidity was not measured in pharma was because humidity sensors were just too expensive in the market. I remember a few years ago, a humidity data logger would cost like $150 or $200. Now these costs have been going down, and therefore researchers are really looking into some products where humidity is an issue. humidity can be issued in medical devices as well. And therefore, in different types of medical devices where the actual drug is already in the medical device, like syringes. So these are areas that can be seen. Also, some products are very sensitive to shock, and very sensitive to be, when a cargo, you can have a flight going, and all of a sudden you have like what we call a hole in the air, bam, and your biology can be hurt. And the worst thing about this type of deviations is that sometimes there is not enough data in terms of the consequences. Temperature, there is a lot of data out there. So it's very easy to identify if it goes above so much temperature, or if this happened in terms of how long and how much deviation there was, so much excursion, I have an effect. But in case of shock, in case of light, the pharma companies, biotech companies, they have to start building data. They have to start gathering the data, so they start understanding more the stability of the product, not only from the temperature point of view, but also from the other variables that are out there. And so that's quite important. The last thing is geolocalization also allows to give you more information about those extreme temperatures, what extreme temperatures are doing to your drug, right? Which is just not being above of a threshold, but how above and where. And because you have different environments, you have different dry situations, and sometimes this information could be useful for the drug companies to have.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot of new options, obviously. Thank you. So Martin, here's an audience question for you. How long before 5G gets into mainstream application? Or are we stuck with 4G for multimodal and ocean shipment monitoring for the time being?
Yeah, no, the LTE or 4G technology will be there for a long time. In fact, LTE means long-term evolution. So it's definitely a network that will be there for a long time. 5G is around in a few countries, but I would say that, for example, in our case, that our devices still have to have the technology to connect to more legacy networks. For example, if a shipment moves from Asia to, let's say, Africa, those 5G networks are not necessarily available in some countries in Africa. So we need to go back to other types of legacy networks that will still be there around as well. So so definitely the 5G low power and the 5G high speed are going to continue being deployed around the world. And I cannot say how long it will take for to have this everywhere, but definitely the major markets currently have 5G available networks today.
Right, and I mean, is 5G really necessary for the kind of level of monitoring and data exchange that we're talking? I mean, I know the low energy thing is probably an advantage in more remote places, but you're not streaming video or whatever. I mean, I assume 4G pretty much gets the job done.
You're absolutely right. So there's like basically two aspects of the 5G. There's what's called the 5G low latency, and that's for the fast, really high speed, controlling drones, controlling, having the type of, real-time data exchange that requires a lot of data. And then there is also another aspect of 5G, which is the low power IoT networks that are still brought in also together with the 5G. And there are a few different protocol. We often talked about LTE-M and also NB-IoT. These are two protocols that have been basically brought in the 5G networks, but are also available in 4G networks as well.
Right. So the point being that yes, 5G is fantastic, but this technology works very well on 4G and other legacy networks.
It has to be, otherwise you cannot have the global coverage. So today it's still, in fact, there are still many networks around the world that are 2G, even though it looks like antiquated, but these networks are still around in Europe, in South America, in Africa. In the US, we're on the last year of a 2G network being phased out. So essentially, it takes time, but the networks are, it's important for companies like us to keep an eye on what's coming up next and being able to support the reliable communication.
Great, thank you for that. So I've got another interesting question here about the definition of real time. So Tive transponders report positions and conditions only a few times per day. This person is asking, they believe they only report a few times a day in order to preserve battery life. Are these what you call real time? How do you define real time? What does real time actually mean for Tive?
Yeah, I can take this question as well. So in case of Tive, you can configure the device to report as frequently as you want. For example, if it's set to report every 30 minutes or every hour, you'll get new data at this cadence. But it also is possible to set a profile on the device to report to you immediately if something that you care about happens. So for example, if you are concerned about temperature excursion, essentially you can set those profiles in our platform to all your device very easily. And then the device, as soon as the temperature goes outside of that range, will turn on the location, turn on the transmitter, and send this data immediately. So that can happen for example, for temperature or for shock, or even if the package was opened, the same thing can happen, in a matter of less than a minute.
Right. So deviations can be prioritized and reported.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's the most important thing. And also a question here about and that constitutes 24/7 monitoring, correct? That you can monitor any shipment, basically all the time in real time.
So in the case of Tive, we have our customers can monitor the shipments themselves, or they can also use our monitoring service. So we have a team of people who are constantly monitor 24/7 shipments and deviations for customers, and have a script based on what should happen if something happens. So they
right.
Call the carrier, email the carrier, ask for a picture, even all the way to call the driver. And we hear all the time that shipments are saved because of this kind of service. So that's something that both sides are available.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I've got a question for Robert here. We want a horror story. What's the worst thing you've witnessed as a result of a deviation or an excursion with a Pharma shipment?
Well, I will say there's probably several. I will say too beforehand that the horror story turned out to be okay, but there's a couple of examples that I'll give. One, early in my career, I was a part of a project where we wanted to understand what our ambient temperature exposure was for our different global lanes. So we sent out 6,000 monitors during the summer, and we sent out 6,000 monitors during the winter to capture the ambient temperature on the different lanes that we were going to. These had a data logger. These had a small box with the data logger inside, and then holes in the box to capture the temperature. So the worst one I think I've ever seen was we were shipping out of the Midwest in the winter month, and it just so happened to be one of the coldest week period winter in a long time. And it was a shipment that was going from there to Peru. And when we got the information back and got the lane for that particular shipment, we saw -10 degrees in the Midwest, and it shipped to Peru, which at the end of the journey saw temperatures +47. And so that was a very interesting thing. The Southern Hemisphere, is their summer season. So that one we had. The other one I would say was another interesting one where we had a bulk shipment that was shipping out of the U.S. and it was going, I forget, somewhere in Europe, and we saw -67, which is degrees Celsius, which is, I'd expected the temperature monitor to be on fire. And, we went through a whole quality investigation with that. And it was, it took a while. We tried to match up the data logger with, the antiquated tracking information to try to figure out exactly where it was. And I think at the end of it, we came to either two conclusions. One, it must have been left on the tarmac, and a jet came by, and the jet engine hit the pallet with the hot air coming out. Or there was also shrink wrap around the pallet, and the monitor was underneath the shrink wrap, which some said, the sun beating down and it being in the shrink wrap, it almost was like a microwave. It kind of heated up the temperature. Again, those are the two that I think of when I think about horror stories.
Wow, those are quite something. Fantastic. All right, thank you so much, Robert. We're running a little slow on time now. We're running out of time. Excuse me. So I have one final question for each of you, and it is this: what would be a message that you would like to give to the pharma companies in terms of the value of real-time monitoring? Alex, I'm going to start with you.
So, pharma biologics is one of the, it's a very, very conservative, conservative industry. I was discussing here with some of our partners, that we were talking, and a colleague of mine just placed the question, how long does it take you, and this is a packaging company that works in pallet shippers, how long it takes to validate or to get into, let's say, a new solution into a pharma company? And the answer was 1 to 7 years. So it, it's one of the more conservative industries, and therefore, today many companies are using technology that has been there for 25 years, or 30. And my first thing to companies is, it is time to, and it's really, I mean, this pandemic has showed us how important it was to step up in terms of, being more open in terms of cooperation. So my first recommendation would be, look into cooperation, look into ways to look for ways with your suppliers and find a way to cooperation as a partnership, so that you can find solutions that are out there, but you can also have partnerships that work a long time, and therefore you can adopt new innovative solutions quicker, because you have to have that relationship, you have to have that trust with your suppliers. The second one is the why it is important right now. We just saw the big disruptions in the market, how supply chain has put a lot of companies in their knees regarding raw materials, regarding deliveries, regarding cost of logistics. And this is where my advice would be really to start working now. Don't wait until a new problem comes out, because these situations are going to be repeating. And therefore, it's better to start looking for those partnerships, opening up to new technologies. And the last thing I'm going to say is, give a chance to new companies. Give a chance to innovation. Don't just go to the traditional old timers, because new companies are the ones that are really looking into new technologies. Startups, companies that are just started, they're brilliant. Sometimes they are not given the chance because they have not been there for a long time. It says, oh, how long do you have been in business? And because they have been in business only for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it's just you're a new company. Let's not forget that the biggest influencers right now today are young companies, and they're very, very young. And therefore, just be more open, look of new technologies, give a chance to startups to show you what else is out there, and create those partnerships, especially create those partnerships with the suppliers.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think there's a lot of talk these days about collaborating with suppliers and making sure that those relationships are really tight. And it's great to see technology facilitating that. Thank you so much, Alex. Martin, what would be a message you'd like to give to pharmaceutical companies in terms of the value of real-time monitoring?
Well, I think you just said it. In terms of the collaboration, I think it's key that this problem cannot be solved by one company or just one partner. It takes I want to say, it takes a village to really move goods around the world and move them in a way that they meet the conditions you need, and also that they with all the disruption that Bobby mentioned earlier that are combined today, shortages of drivers, airlines being canceling flights, and all of this stuff. it's very challenging. But I would say that from the technical point of view, having access to more stream of data and more insight is really something that that companies can leverage today, like especially location. I think location, it's something that being able to know where something happens and also know now that something happens there is just opening up a completely new way of managing shipments in a proactive way from maybe what Alex mentioned about earlier, the traditional kind of reactive data logger monitors that we have that are still today the most used in pharma. So the idea of having real-time location data and condition data that they can trust is, I think it just opens up completely a new way of managing shipments.
Yeah, that's fantastic. The idea that you could actually, have the option of calling a truck driver and go, why are you there instead of where you're supposed to be is that's quite revolutionary, really. It's a bit of a game changer. Wonderful. Robert, what message would you like to give pharma companies about the benefits of real-time monitoring?
Well, a couple of points for me. We completed a survey a couple of months ago, just surveying key cold chain experts in the pharma field in different areas. Pharma companies, packaging companies, and transport providers. And what we saw is there's going to be a huge paradigm shift in the next 3 to 5 years from the data loggers to real-time monitoring. And the second thing I want to say is really, at different companies, pharma companies that I'm working out with are building out their what they call control towers, which I know other industries do. But the control tower here is specific to not only supply chain visibility, but they're investing money in the control tower related to proactive monitoring and really understanding what their products are doing outside the four walls of their pharma and while they're in transit. So I think that's key to the real-time monitoring. The real-time monitoring is going to be that focal point. And as Martin said, you've got the Internet of Things, you've got the different monitoring capabilities, either you or let Tive or others monitor on your behalf. And that goes with the customization that we talked about earlier. The customized medicine is not going away. The rare disease, the more one liquid nitrogen shipments of the -150 to -200. We're going to see that more and more out of as we mature within our practice. So I think that it's good to jump on the wagon now. You'll be that closer when in the next couple of years when you're going to have to see that that's a requirement, not just a good to have.
That's great. Yeah, so it's one of these technological advantages that's going to go and turn into a must-have. So best to get on it now, I guess, is the message. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for. Thank you to Robert from Professional Supply Chain Resources and Alex and Martin from Tive. This has been really interesting. A special thanks to everyone for participating and asking questions. I think we've learned a lot about the benefits of real-time monitoring of shipments in the pharma industry and a great deal else beside. We had a lot of questions today and we'll be answering the ones we didn't get to with you offline. You're also going to get an email later with a link to view the webinar on demand, as well as contact information for Tive. Thank you so much to everyone for your participation. Stay safe, stay happy, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.